Hi, Roy here. I thought I'd pop in to talk about my September reads as we're near the end of the month. So I did quite a lot of Shorty September, a bit of Shaketember, and a buddy read with Angelina at Books Do Things For Me of Winnetou by Karl May. So as I haven't got that in front of me, I'll talk about that first, lest I forget. So this is a sort of Western or a proto-Western, I suppose, written in Germany, late 19th century, so very early in the history of fiction of the West. First of a series, and it's got a lot of popularity. It's been in and out of fashion. It's got some controversy too. I think in terms of the things that people are not so hot on, yes, it's a very noble, savage story, the way the Apache hero character Winnetou is described. It's also a kind of a white saviour story, the way the other main protagonist is a young guy, who gets to be called, with the brilliant nickname, Old Shatterhand. So basically, this guy who's writing the story, and is easy to confuse with Karl May himself, who, third thing, had never been to America. So that doesn't bother me. Lots of Western writers hadn't been to America, and very, very few had actually been there at the time the West was, as it's being described, as this kind of moving frontier. Anyway, yes, so this young guy gets a job. He's German. He's over there in America, gets a job as a surveyor with a group who are surveying land ready for the railroad to roll on through the territory. That gets quite fraught because the other people on the crew are like rubbish. They just lie around drinking and let him do all the work, and he's very diligent. They have various adventures. It's quite picaresque, one thing after another. And there's run-ins with what are called Indians in this, so particularly with Apaches and Kiowa. And it's interesting. He ends up Old Shatterhand. He gets that nickname because, as well as being a brilliant worker, he seems to be a genius at virtually anything. If a language comes up, he already knows how to speak it. He knows maths, he knows literature, and he's mighty. So when it comes to battling his drunken colleagues, he can knock them out with one punch, basically. So he's almost like a sort of early Doc Savage, Superman, in that he's accomplished in everything, and he's kind of wise and honourable as well. So the key conflict is partly between people, but it's also about the morality of stealing land from the Native Americans, and it's very much on the side of the Native Americans. So Shatterhand has been complicit in this, but he forms this enduring friendship with Winnetou from the Apache. So there's sort of how that works out. And like I say, picaresque adventures. It's pretty action-packed. It's pretty... Angelina says it's like something that young boys would read. But I'd agree with that. It certainly works as a sort of... It's a bit like when we used to play this kind of thing in the playground. It's kind of... It's obviously it's a bit above that level, but it's pretty straightforward. I'm glad I read it. It's interesting. I don't feel particularly moved to read on in the series, but I wouldn't not read one if that was my fate. Obviously, I'm only reading translations. And I say translations because I had a physical book, and I read a couple of other translations as well, and they're all very different, even down to different numbers of chapters. There's a chapter I seem to have in the print book, doesn't seem to be any in any of the Kindle ones, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But yeah, Winnetou, good, and it was a great fun read with Angelina. So we were talking about it on email, and I think neither of us thought it was the worst book we'd ever read. Neither did we become like Karl May fans. I also read, and this was a short book, which I was in Shorty September mode, a Solomon Kane story. So this is in a series that's coming out called Heroic Legends, also called Savage Tales Short Fiction, where they're basically sequels to the work of Robert E. Howard using his characters. So there's been some Conan ones, and this is Solomon Kane, who's a Puritan adventurer. So he's in historical time, and there was a movie actually quite good. This one's called, anyway, book called Hound of God by Jonathan Maberry. He's Solomon Kane, that is. He's a sort of a wandering troubleshooter fighting evil. So with his swords and pistols, he will battle basically the devil, monsters and stuff like that. He's kind of like he's a bit like The Witcher, I suppose, in a sense, except he being a Puritan, is very straight down the line, sort of. He doesn't have occult powers or things like that himself. There's quite an interesting debate between him and another goody who comes from the Catholic tradition about sort of, does it matter if we're both on the same side? But there isn't a lot of that kind of thing. Mainly it's an action monster story. It's Solomon Kane doing his thing. It's an extra story. It's a cheap, short read. Bang, that's good. So having mentioned Shorty September, let me tell you probably know this, that it's a annual event about reading short books. Short, however one defines them, but say, for the sake of argument, 150 pages maximum. So that could be like novellas and stuff like that. Hosted by Crystal, Fibre Artsy, Karen, Roving Reader, Heather, too many Heathers. And I really, really enjoyed it. It's such a pleasure to just read lots and lots of things, and you're never sort of stuck with them. You're never saddled with wading through something, because they're short. They are short. So looking at what I read in the world of shortness, H.G. Wells, The Time Machine. I didn't realise it was quite as short as this. So this is in a series of Penguin Archive editions where they sort of republish stuff with a bit of a vintage look. I actually would have thought I'd read it, and I don't think I have. I've seen the movie, the George Powell movie, and I've read a sequel by Stephen Baxter called The Time Ships. Reading the original, it's great. It's kind of bleak as a prognosis of where humanity's going to end up, So starts off in sort of Victorian times. There's a guy, we only know him as the time traveller. He's invented a time machine, and it's the future that he goes into. And there, without giving too much away, just in case you don't know anything about it, society is split into two. So it looks like the surface dwellers are like the sort of masters, and these like subterranean, more beast-like ones are their sort of slaves. But is it quite as simple as that? We will see. So that was a good read, a science fiction classic. I had on my shelf for a long time Miss Marple, The Life and Times of Miss Jane Marple by, did I just say Jane? Well, you know who I mean. Miss Marple by Anne Hart. So it's a sort of biography. You know, I've read a lot of biographies of fictional characters. Sherlock Holmes, James Bond, Tarzan, Doc Savage. There's a sort of a family history of Lord Peter Wimsey that's sort of in that zone as well. There's one of John Steed from the Avengers. Unlike a lot of those, this is more taking stuff quite painstakingly, taking elements from the stories themselves and assembling them to give us a portrait of the life of the character exactly as it is in the book. It's not filling in the gaps. It's not giving her more backstory than you would actually get if you were to read all of the books. It's not solving the anomalies with some kind of clever thing, like her immense age, for instance. You know, so because the stories are written over a long period of time, she starts off as an old lady, and there are things in the stories that mean they're not timeless. You know, actual history of the 20th century is happening, things like the Second World War. So how does she get to be, you know, she can't be 120, can she? So it raises those issues but doesn't resolve them. Though she does not take an immortality serum. She does not deploy decoy robots like Nick Fury in Marvel Comics. She is not, Miss Marple is not a code name used by a succession of different characters. You know, there's none of that explanatory stuff. What you do get is really a way to revisit the stories, and it would be best read if you've read a fair amount of Miss Marple, or at least seen the screen versions. So we get stuff about her, where she lives, St Mary Mead, the village where she lives, her career, her what it would be like visiting her house. So again, you know, taking the various times people go to her pad and putting them together so you get a picture of what her house is like, and what she's like, and what various other sorts of characters who are recurring characters, what they're like, what their role is. So that was a lot of fun. There's a Poirot one as well, that's bigger than this. So yeah, that was good. Exactly the sort of book that might just never have been actually read. You know, I could well have left that on the shelf, if not for the marvel of Shorty September. Then at one point, I went into a bookshop with the specific idea to see if they had any short books. And I thought, I'm going to come out with a short book. And the one I chose was called Claimed by Gertrude Barrows Bennett. Didn't know the book, didn't know the author, didn't know what to make of the cover. I'm still not quite sure if I like it, this kind of yellow submarine graphic. But at least it's a picture, you know, it's not... I'm one of those people who rails against the sort of tendency towards abstract covers. It's the greatest novel by one of the pioneering female voices in horror. So apparently she wrote in Weird Tales, she was in those kind of early 20th century publications, and what we have here, I think, is a strange story that really could be put alongside some classics like The Call of Cthulhu, the one story by H.P. Lovecraft, or let me think, The Great God Pan by Arthur Machen. In other words, in the top rank of Uncanny Tales, because it's great. It's a sea story, sort of. It's not there's none of your regular monsters. You know, it's not like as in, oh, it's a werewolf or a ghost. It keeps you guessing. There's mounting dread. There's weirdness. It's short. So, yeah, I really can't speak too highly of this book in a Penguin weird fiction series. So it's Penguin again. Yeah, how long is it? It's 127 pages of story. So, yeah, great read. It's an interesting length, isn't it? Because it's not a short story where it's like, real espresso shot length of experience. It's not quite like a full novel because there's no room for any messing about, but there's enough space to develop character and atmosphere and to have plot and to have some twists and some revelation. So claimed. What else? Now, I'm not a big guy for Booker Prize reading. I'm sure I've read some winners over the years, but just by bumping into them through the sort of natural Brownian motion of reader meets book. But I did look at what was in the long list, and I picked up Seascraper by Benjamin Wood, partly because it's round here. It's set in, or in a version of, a coastal town near me that does have its own uncanniness. So it's the sort of place where the beach is like sands that go out for literally miles. So when the sea goes out, it like disappears, and you've got these sort of shaky mud flats, that can be quite dangerous because some of it's like quakey and you can sink into it. And when the sea comes in, it's like, oh, we've only got half an inch. Whoops, we're cut off. Oh, we're dead. So that's a sort of weird setting, and it's set in the past. There's the sort of main protagonist. He works on those sands in doing an old-fashioned way of gathering seafood. What is it? Cockles? He's a shanker. Shrimp, scraping for shrimp, with a horse and cart. And that's what he's been doing. He lives with his mother. It's very claustrophobic. And then something happens that puts his whole existence into a different kind of perspective. It seems like there's a film director coming, enlisting his help in scoping out the area for scenes in a film he's going to make. It really kept me on the hook. Like I say, great atmosphere. A lot of what's the word? Insight into the characters, I suppose. And I'm sorry it didn't get through to the short list, but yeah, what do I know? For a start, I haven't read any of the others. But still a good one. Still recommend it. It's one of those, like, it's short, it's unforgettable. When you're in it, it's like not necessarily the most pleasant environment to be in, but it's very compelling and all, surrounding. I surprised by the relative youth of the author, given that I can remember that kind of small front room, sort of overheated with fire. They're sort of a mixture of being too hot and too cold, because you've got fires, but you've also got the sort of drafts as well, because that's the only heating there is, and just the kind of tightness of the society that people are in. So Seascraper. And couple more. See, one thing about short books is you can read a lot of them, including Jerusalem, the story of a song, Edwin John Lerner. So this is about Jerusalem, the hymn, which has become an interesting anthem. And as it says, it's a sort of anthem that seems to work for all sorts of different groups and people. It's across the political spectrum. It's sort of an unofficial English national anthem, but it's, it isn't just that. So it's telling us how it went from being not even a whole poem, it's part of a poem. So a few lines in a big long poem called Milton, in the sort of introductory part, are that and did those feet in ancient times, Walk upon England's green and pleasant land. That one. You know the riff. Hang on, so except I've got it wrong. This is what it is. And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green? And was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen? And did the countenance divine shine forth upon our clouded hills? And was Jerusalem builded here among these dark satanic mills? Bring me my bow of burning gold, bring me my arrows of desire, bring me my spear, O clouds unfold, bring me my chariot of fire. I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. So it's the story of how that text has been set to music, who did it, why they did it, how it was used as a patriotic sort of war effort song. It also became the official, and for a time the only licensed users of it were the Women's Institute. So there was sort of this women's organisation who were associated with women's suffrage. So all of these things intertwine. Then it was orchestrated by Elgar and became this different kind of piece of music, and then how it's been adopted and used in various ways. So there's a lot in here. It's really interesting. It's because it's expanding on everybody who touches upon it. There's an element of repetition because you hit up against something you've already read about a little bit, but in a different context. Yeah, good one. And finally, I think in the world of shortness, Ormeshadow by Priya Sharma. Like this a lot. I knew the author from just a short story or two, really. I saw her speaking at a con. And also, I partly got it because of the name. So, because my town has a similar name, even though this is set in the southwest and we're in the northwest. So, mostly it reads like a historical novel, a coming-of-age novel, where following a catastrophic misfortune, a boy and his mother end up leaving the city of Bath and living on a farm with relatives who, maybe they don't really want them there, and there's weirdness about inheritance and land and stuff like that. And in the background, a strange myth to do with a sleeping dragon. So although most of it you could just read as a straight historical with a little bit of a sort of weirdness hovering in the background, it's also, in a kind of Alan Garner sort of way, it is a fantasy. And if you're holding out for fantastic elements, it does deliver. So, yeah, really enjoyed that. Ormeshadow, Priya Sharma. It was Shaketember. Shaketember, a month celebrating the works of William Shakespeare, hosted by Kelly, books I'm not reading, Jason, Old Blues Chapter and Verse, and Nicole, Day of Small Things. I'm probably not going to try and do a big analysis of anything Shakespearean.
I have no tongue for it.
Mainly I've read Measure for Measure. Measure for Measure. So I first bought the Arden Shakespeare edition, quickly realised I wouldn't be able to make head or tail of it, so I got one of these No Fear editions where you get a side by side the proper text and a modernised version that any fool can understand. So first passed through this, so I knew what was going on, read it properly as well, read it in its original. And it's a difficult play. I mean, I gather that these ones get called problem plays. Gavin at Genre Books, he talks about it much more eloquently than I can. But there was stuff in it I liked, but really it was... I and this isn't an original thought at all, but it has the structure of a comedy, but without the comedy element, without being comedic. You know, it's actually more like a tragedy. So the bleakness goes down and down and down. The more you think about it, the more sort of awful it is, really. I don't know if you've ever seen those sculptures by the Chapman brothers, but at first glance they look like, oh, somebody's made a scene with models and toys. That looks amusing. And then you peer at it and it's like, you know, sort of the ultimate horror. So yeah, I can't say I enjoyed it apart from the language. You know, it's delivered brilliantly. There's a particular speech by the Duke, who's one of the main guys, where he's explaining why death isn't so bad, and in a bit like the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible, it does that kind of like taking things that are incredibly negative but expressing them so well that it feels that there's sort of a you know, there's still meaning to it. Like I said, I can't explain this stuff really, but I did think and I did read the introduction to this Arden version, which at 148 pages is like a short book. It's a book, like a whole book about that play. So I read that as well, which was good. So I'm sort of counting that doubly. So that's my thing. September was Winnetou. Lots of short stuff. In terms of Shorty September, I think I've done something which, if I'd set out to do it deliberately, would have been very difficult, which is to not achieve any of the prompts. Because there are a lot of prompts. So not to hit any of them, despite reading quite a lot of books, that's a sort of achievement in itself, I think. But they're great prompts too, and I'm hoping to do Shorty September next year. So all in all, pretty good month. We cruise on into October with new events coming along, overwriting all of those. So yeah, all right, I'll be back soon with something else.